Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We have a new video today from Palantir COO Shyam Sankar. Recently went on CNBC and talked about Palantir's healthcare ambitions. This is a really interesting video, primarily because Palantir in their Q2 earnings talked a lot about what they've been doing in the healthcare world. I've been researching some of their healthcare initiatives in terms of what they've been doing with the NHS, what they've been doing with COVID, vaccine distributions, all that stuff. And it's been interesting to see their progress. And this segment is where Shyam took primetime TV to really explain what they're doing in the healthcare space. And some of the stuff he said was very interesting. So let's get into that right now.
First, COVID, I know, is big for you in terms of managing some of the government's work on vaccines and medications. And now monkeypox. Tell us about it.
Well, thanks for having me back, Sarah. Absolutely. You know, one of the things that makes our presence in healthcare unique is that we span the entire value chain. So, of course, working with government agencies to help them distribute vaccines efficiently, plugging into the pharma companies and the biomanufacturing processes that create them, driving the hospital operations that is getting those needles into your arms and driving the healthcare outcomes, clearing the backlog in the wake of COVID.
Why should investors care about this? I talked to our team actually reached out to a number of analysts ahead of today, wondering about the healthcare business, and they said it's still such a tiny slice. Clearly, there's growth there. How big of a part of
this is a good question. Obviously, what Palantir did with the COVID vaccine distributions was very strong and effective and efficient, and they might land a 360 million pound federated data platform from the NHS that's going to be announced in September. And we've seen that Palantir has hired former people from the NHS, and it seems likely they're going to get it done. They launched a $34 million contract with the NHS back in December 2022 or 2020. That's going to expire in 2022. So obviously they know what they're doing when it comes to supply chains, logistics, and all that stuff around healthcare. They've also done some great stuff with drug discovery. But the host is asking a pretty good question from an analyst perspective. If it's such a small part of the business, relatively speaking, what's the overall value? Why should we really care?
Part of the business do you intend it to be?
I think healthcare is absolutely massive. The number of opportunities that we're seeing to help the U.S. clear the patient backlog with hospital operations, to deal with nursing shortages. COVID really put healthcare on its knees here. It showed the weaknesses in the system. It spurred innovation. It's created funding to go after and fix these problems. That's as true in the U.S. as it is in the U.K. and Canada and continental Europe, in Japan. And so we see a lot of opportunity all the way from the preclinical, clinical R&D side through clinical trials, all the way to the payer and provider side.
Broadly, what is happening beyond healthcare, Shyam, with the government business? You were expecting all these deals to close and have pushed that out.
We're really excited about the government business. It has grown at a 35% compounded rate, the U.S. government business in particular, over the last decade. The nature of these contracts, when you're going after $100 million, billion-dollar contracts, they are lumpy. Some years you see 0% growth. Some years you see 50% plus growth. But what's important for us is really the long-term trend, the investment.
So quick thoughts I have here. Palantir there are certain moments when companies start putting out figures and stats and these ideas that they want to get out into the mainstream. Alex Karp, for no mistake, said on the earnings call that the government business has compounded at a CAGR, compounded annual growth rate, of about 35%. Now, why did he say this? Because the government business this year is declining pretty rapidly. I mean, it's not doing that well, even with everything happening in Russia and Ukraine, and we'll see if those contracts happen a little bit more later as a catalyst for Palantir. But, the government business is slowing down a bit. And so when he was on the call, I think the reason Karp pulled out that stat that he's probably been thinking about for a while, he obviously rehearsed that stat in his head before the call, was to tell people exactly what Shyam just repeated on CNBC, which is that in a decade, you can have a compounded CAGR of 35%, and there may some years that there are going to be some years that are flat, that are negative, because you're going after these $100 million, multi-billion-dollar contracts, and they have a lot of weight to them. They're very heavy, and it's very hard to get those deals done. Those deals, it takes time to get done. So I think when they're asking Shyam about the government business, as you look here on the screen, Palantir healthcare customers, you have the CDC, the NHS, Sampo, National Institutes of Health. There are just so many different organizations that Palantir works with from a governmental health agency perspective that is leaning into this argument that there is a lot of sector of growth, especially if you believe in the macro argument that COVID particularly showed weaknesses in the healthcare system. How big are those weaknesses, and how many opportunities do those weaknesses present in order for a company like Palantir to expose the gap? That's something that we have to see over the next decade.
Investments that we're making to be the operating system for public health care, for defense and national security, for civil administration.
How do you think about the resilience of those businesses and what you offer in a recessionary environment?
I think they become even more important. If you look at in the wake of COVID, all those people were wondering, will these be enduring investments? And you see crisis after crisis that those capabilities have met their moment. The monkeypox vaccine is being allocated on the same infrastructure that the COVID vaccine was being allocated on. The legitimation crisis that Western institutions face right now in the wake of the recession and the need to take care of people has only become more important. You see that not only in the US, but again, in Western Europe as well.
So this was sort of a response to the fact that, yes, if we're in a recession, technically with negative GDP growth for the past 2 quarters, what is the resiliency like of businesses and governmental agencies? And what Sham is saying here is that Foundry, which is trying to become this operating system for every organization in the world to be able to run upon, be able to make data-driven decisions as a result of that, should be the reason that those businesses continue to stay resilient. Now, I don't know, he hasn't asked too much about sales and sales growth because all of the stuff we already know. The question is like your go-to-market strategy. That's the stuff that I don't know if Sham really got grilled on. But that's like the overarching question at the end of the day. Is Palantir going to be able to get the job done when it comes to sales?
Do you think there's a disconnect between the stock market and what you're seeing fundamentally? Do you think
there's a little bit of a hint of that question right here?
Wall Street understands your story? I'm sure it's been frustrating to watch the reaction to earnings and just what we've seen all year. The stock's down almost 50%.
When we look at the business, the thing that we are most excited about is what is going on in the U.S. So if you look at the U.S. commercial business, the customer count growth there has grown from 34 customers a year ago to 119 customers in the last quarter. Obviously, that's starting on a small base, but that's incredible growth, and it shows you how much runway we have ahead of us. The revenue there grew 120% year over year. And as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. government business has a long track record of growing at 35%. And so together we see a lot of growth ahead of us here. And I think investors are starting to pay attention to that story.
It's good to see you, Sham.
So investors are not really paying attention to that story, unfortunately, because the stock is still in the gutter. But a couple of things that he said here. Now, he reiterated his last point was like, it's a long-term story, right? And that the business is going to grow. Yes, the U.S. customer count has grown from 34 to 119. Now you're starting at a small base. So like it's not phenomenal, but there is a lot of room for runway. I mean, you look at a company like Snowflake that has like 4,000 customers and Palantir in 119. It just shows there is a massive opportunity for them to grow very quickly and very largely. The question becomes, are they going to be able to nail sales and marketing? And this is what we've got to see. This is what we've been waiting for after earnings calls as shareholders. This has sort of been the public debate. Like, are they going to be able to pull this off? If they are able to pull this off, then there's massive levels of growth because they are this operating system for the government and the healthcare industry and the supply chain and logistics and all these different industries that rely on data-driven decision making. Palantir could power that. And that means massive growth. That means massive potential. The question is, are they going to be able to do it from a sales and marketing perspective? Now, the healthcare stuff that he talks about today, I think it's interesting. I remember Palantir invested in this one company, or they launched a partnership with them for drug discovery. I made a video about this on December 2021. And it was a company that uses like liquid forms of dilution within certain molecules to biochemically figure out how to discover more drugs. I'm forgetting the name of them. I'll try to put it in the description. But they've been in part of the healthcare drug discovery space for a long time. And the reason for this, not just COVID vaccine distribution, it's not just finding new drugs, it's Foundry as an operating system to be able to manage and build all these things on top of that stuff. Sham Sankar, also very important to understand, is on the board of a company called DNA, Ginkgo Bioworks. Kathy Wood has like 100 million shares of this company. And this company is basically a biotech platform. They don't make drugs, but they take a royalty and a fee off of the companies that use their platform and their licensing to be able to make their own drugs. So Sham knows a lot about the healthcare industry. He understands a lot about drugs. The question is that going to translate to a lot of business success and upside for Palantir as the years go forward? Those are my thoughts. It was nice to see Sham talk on earnings after Palantir earnings, talk on live TV and sort of see what his thoughts are. Hopefully we get some more stuff from management coming out. Sham also did a Twitter thread. For those who are not on Twitter, my @ name is @AmitIsInvesting. A lot of people were happy that he published a Twitter thread because he finally talked on Twitter, and this is what we've been asking for. Hey, management, can you like just publish some content so your shareholders can retweet it and see the stuff you're doing? More of that, I think, is obviously going to be good for Palantir, and let's hopefully see that continues to happen. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. If you want daily Palantir audio, check out audia.io/dailypalantir. Bunch of audio clips of Palantir content for you to check out every single day when you're driving to work. Turn it on, listen to some Palantir audio, get your daily updates from there. Thank you all for listening and watching. I appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.